Literal comprehension, function, and test completion questions on the digital SAT. What are they? How can we solve them? And how can we recognize them? Let's take a look. So when we look at literal comprehension questions, there's usually only about 1 to 3 on the test. What you are trying to do with literal comprehension questions is find the gist of the passage and find the answer choice that best captures the summary that you already identified. So an example would be, based on X, what is true about Y? So you would go to the passage, you would read the passage, you would understand it, summarize it in your own words, and then when you read the question, you would say, okay, based on what it's saying here, what do I know to be true about Julie or John? And then you would look at the answer choices, and you should already know, based on what you've read and understand, what is true about Julie or John or X or Y. You always need to be reading in full sentences and always summarize what is going on in the passage. If you've gone down 2 to 3 sentences and you're not exactly sure where you're at in the passage or what is going on in the passage, you need to go back, reread, and make sure you are actively reading and trying to understand what is happening. Only then will you be able to match the idea that you summarized yourself and match it with one of the answer choices that are correct for that specific literal comprehension question. Now we have function questions. These are questions that ask, why is that in the passage? Or what function does that line best serve? Or what is the function of that section in the passage? These are questions essentially asking you, do you understand what is going on in the passage? Do you understand the order in which things are happening? And can you justify why a certain sentence or certain sentences are in the passage? Are they strengthening something? Are they weakening an argument? Are they providing an example of something? So those are things you want to be aware of. And the only way you can understand that is if you are, again, summarizing the passage in your own words and figuring out what exactly is going on in the passage. If you can't do that, then you won't have any idea as to why a certain sentence is in the passage. You don't know what it's doing because you don't know what's going on. Remember, there is a difference between the main argument of the passage, basically what they are trying to argue for or against in the passage, and then the goal of the passage. Is it to persuade you? Is it to educate you? Is it to inform you? Is it to challenge you? So those are 2 different things. You can have one argument that's trying to persuade you for it, or you can have another same argument, but this time it's trying to, dissuade you or entertain you, right? So make sure you're able to, again, paint this picture of what is going on in the passage, understand it, understand the tone, understand what they're trying to do, and this will give you all the tools you need to answer function questions on the digital SAT. And then we have text completion questions. These are questions that have a long passage, and then the very last line, or maybe somewhere in the middle, there's a blank, and it's asking you to complete the text. One of the first things we want to do is we want to read the question and make sure we understand that it is a text completion question. Then we want to read the passage and make sure we understand what is going on in the passage, what the passage is trying to do, and where the passage is going. And then lastly, we want to go through the answer choices and see which one of those makes the most sense in that blank in the passage above. But you can only do that if you know what's going on and you can reasonably infer what should happen next or what the next part of the passage should be. So a lot of these questions are going to be presented with an argument in the passage itself, and an argument is made up of a premise and a conclusion. And the way you can understand what the conclusion is in the passage is it'll say, so-and-so determined, or they concluded, or they found that because of this, this should happen. What you need to be finding out or figuring out is if you think it's a conclusion, ask yourself the why test. If it's some type of they concluded that dinosaurs existed 5 million years ago, and you say, well, why? Then you can go back to the passage where it says, because they conducted a ton of studies and found out that, all of these things existed and so on and so forth. So you always want to ask yourself, whatever that why is, that is the premise. And the premise sets the stage for the assumptions that bridge you to the conclusion. And the conclusion is usually almost always really clear in the passage as to what the conclusion is for the scientist, the author, whoever it might be. So find that conclusion, figure out what the premise is, and then that will help you infer which answer choice is going to be the correct one for that text completion question. More often than not, these answer choices will strengthen or weaken an argument that is already presented at the top. It just depends what they're asking you to do. Are they asking you to weaken that argument? Are they asking you to strengthen it? And then it kind of gets blended in with other argument, strengthen, weaken type questions that we're going to go over later. But the main thing here is get very good at finding the conclusion and the premise. So that covers literal comprehension, function questions, and text completion questions. The best way to study for this is to do more practice problems and figure out why you're getting answers wrong. Use YouTube, Google, the digital SAT answer explanations that is found on the College Board. Make sure you're understanding why you got it wrong, and then make sure you know what to do next time, what to look for next time. Because it's only by removing these weaknesses that we can see incremental improvement week over week in your digital SAT score. I'll see you in the next video.